In the year 1314, King Edward II of England signed a royal decree. It banned a single sport. The punishment was imprisonment. The reason was simple. Too many of his subjects were dying. The sport was football. It was not a game. It was a battle between villages. Hundreds of men on each side. No rules. No referees. No goals. The ball was a pig's bladder. The field was the countryside between two churches. The objective was to deliver the bladder to the rival village by any means necessary. The means usually involved breaking the spine of the man in front of you. Football, as played in medieval Britain, was not designed for entertainment. It was designed for revenge. Two neighboring villages would agree on a Shrove Tuesday match. The men gathered at dawn. The ball was tossed into the muddy ground between them, and then nothing happened for hours. Because the first thing both teams did was attack each other directly, the ball was largely forgotten. Bones were broken. Skulls were fractured. Men drowned trying to push the ball across frozen rivers. Coroner reports from the 14th century list football as a recurring cause of death, alongside plague and starvation. The matches lasted from sunrise to sunset. Sometimes they lasted 3 days. There was no offside. There was no ball control. There was only forward momentum, achieved through punching, kicking, biting, and trampling. A French monk in 1365 described the game as a contest in which the participants strive to break each other's legs and crush each other's bodies for the amusement of the crowd. The crowd was not amused. The crowd was usually betting on which player would die next. King Edward II ban did not work. Edward III banned it again in 1331. Richard II banned it in 1389. Henry VIII banned it in 1540. The bans accomplished nothing, because the game was the closest thing peasants had to legal warfare. By the 16th century, English kings had issued at least 30 separate football bans. Every one of them was ignored. The ball itself was a public health hazard. Medieval footballs were made from inflated pig bladders, sometimes wrapped in leather. The bladders had to be inflated by mouth. Immediately after the pig was slaughtered, the man assigned to blow up the ball inhaled raw porcine fluids directly into his lungs. Tuberculosis and brucellosis spread through entire villages this way. The bladders rotted within days. Players were known to vomit mid-match from the stench alone. By the 1700s, the sport had spread to English schools. Eton, Harrow, Rugby, and Winchester each developed their own variations. The variations were equally violent. At Rugby school, a student named William Webb Ellis allegedly picked up the ball and ran with it in 1823, founding the sport of rugby. He probably did not. The story was invented decades later. Eton's wall game had no documented goal score between 1909 and 2016. The point was not to score. The point was to grind your opponents into the wall until they bled. The first attempt to civilize football came in 1863. A group of English gentlemen met in a London pub called the Freemasons' Tavern. They wanted to create a unified set of rules. They argued for hours. They could not agree on whether players should be allowed to hack each other in the shins with iron-tipped boots. The pro-hacking faction insisted shin kicking was essential to the sport's character. The anti-hacking faction insisted men should not be permanently crippled at sporting events. The two sides split. The hackers founded rugby. The non-hackers founded the Football Association. Modern football was born in a tavern argument about whether breaking legs should be legal. The first professional footballers appeared in the 1880s. They were coal miners and factory workers. They worked 12-hour shifts underground, then played matches on Saturdays. Their boots had metal studs nailed directly through the leather, sometimes protruding into the foot. Their shin pads, when they existed, were strips of cork tied with string. Tackles to the head were legal. Concussions were not recognized as medical events. A player knocked unconscious was carried to the sideline, slapped awake, and sent back onto the pitch. The average career of a professional footballer in 1890 lasted 4 years. Most retired with permanent injuries. Many died young of pneumonia contracted during winter matches played in soaking wool jerseys. There were no substitutes. If you broke your leg, your team played with 10 men for the rest of the season. The footballs of this era were still made of leather, but now they absorbed water. A dry football weighed approximately 1 pound. A wet football, after 90 minutes of rain, weighed nearly 3 pounds. Heading a wet leather football was equivalent to being struck in the skull with a wet brick. Players did this hundreds of times per match. They did this for entire careers. They did not know what it was doing to their brains. It would take 100 years to find out. In 2002, an English footballer named Jeff Astle died at the age of 59. He had played for West Bromwich Albion. He had scored 174 goals. He had been famous for his heading ability. In his final years, he could not recognize his own daughters. His autopsy revealed advanced chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the same brain disease found in retired boxers. The coroner ruled his death an industrial injury. Astle had been killed by 30 years of heading a wet leather ball. The Astle case opened the door. Researchers began studying retired footballers in large numbers. The results were devastating. Former professional footballers are 3.5 times more likely to die of neurodegenerative disease than the general population. They are 5 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's. The sport had been quietly destroying its own players for a century. Performance enhancement followed the same dark path. In the 1950s and 1960s, professional footballers across Europe were routinely given amphetamines before matches. The pills were called vitamins by team doctors. They were industrial-grade stimulants. Players reported running until their hearts felt like they would explode. Several did explode. A Danish cyclist named Knud Enemark Jensen collapsed and died during the 1960 Rome Olympics. His death was the first publicly acknowledged doping fatality in modern sport, and the same drugs were standard in football dressing rooms. In 1989, at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, 97 Liverpool fans were crushed to death against steel fencing during an FA Cup semi-final. The fences had been installed to prevent fans from invading the pitch. The police directed too many supporters into a single enclosed pen. The crowd had nowhere to go. It took 33 years for the British authorities to formally accept that the dead were not responsible for their own deaths. Today, the global football industry generates over $600 billion annually. Kylian Mbappé earns approximately €250 million per year. The Premier League's broadcast rights sell for over £12 billion per cycle. The sport is owned by hedge funds, oil states, and private equity firms. The footballs are made of polyurethane and weigh exactly 450 grams. But the basic action remains identical. 22 men chase a ball across a field. They collide with each other. They strike the ball with their heads. They are paid extraordinary sums to do this until their bodies fail. The medieval villagers played for honor. The Victorian miners played for wages. Mbappé plays for an empire. The ball is the same ball. The damage is the same damage. King Edward II banned the sport 700 years ago because it was killing his subjects. He failed. The sport is still killing them. We have simply built better stadiums to watch it happen.